Single Dad dug a stranger out of the snow when she opened her eyes. She called him by name. The winter wind howled through the Montana pines, sending sheets of snow dancing across the frozen landscape. Ethan Walker's muscles burned as he swung his axe, each strike echoing through the frigid air. The pile of split logs beside him grew steadily larger, a necessary shield against the brutal cold that had settled over their remote cabin. From his position near the woodshed, he could see Lily through the frost-edged window, her dark hair falling forward as she bent over her textbooks. The sight of his 15-year-old daughter, safe and warm inside, brought a slight smile to his weathered face. These quiet moments, just the two of them getting through another day together, had become the rhythm of their lives since losing her mother. The wind picked up, driving needle-sharp ice crystals against his face. Ethan pulled his wool cap lower and reached for another log. That's when he heard it, a sound so faint he almost missed it beneath the storm's fury. A cry, weak and desperate, carried on the wind. He straightened, muscles tense, listening. There it was again. There it was again. "Hello?" Ethan called out, his deep voice swallowed by the swirling snow. He stepped away from the woodpile, squinting against the whiteout conditions. "Is someone out there?" The only answer was another moan, barely audible but unmistakably human. Ethan dropped his axe and plowed through the knee-deep snow toward their long gravel driveway, his heart pounding. No one in their right mind would be out in weather like this. The cry came again, closer now. Ethan pushed forward until he saw it, a dark shape half buried in a snowbank near where their driveway met the county road. His blood ran cold at the sight of a human hand protruding from the white drift. "Lily!" he shouted toward the cabin. "Lily, come quick! Bring blankets!" He reached the snowbank and dropped to his knees, frantically digging with his gloved hands. The snow fell away to reveal a woman's face, her skin nearly as white as the snow that entombed her. Her eyes were closed, lips tinged blue. The cabin door crashed open. "Dad, what's wrong?" Lily's voice carried over the wind. "There's someone here. Get the blankets from the cedar chest, all of them." Ethan continued digging, his movements urgent but careful. The woman was dressed for the city, not the wilderness. A wool coat and leather boots that offered little protection against Montana's savage winter. Lily appeared beside him, arms full of their warmest blankets. Together, they cleared away enough snow for Ethan to slip his arms beneath the woman's shoulders and knees. She was lighter than he expected, like lifting a child. "Open the door," he ordered, cradling the unconscious woman against his chest. Lily ran ahead, holding the heavy wooden door wide as Ethan carried their frozen visitor inside. The warmth of the cabin hit him like a wall. "The couch, by the fire," Lily said, already pulling the coffee table aside to make room. The flames in their river rock fireplace cast flickering shadows across the woman's still features as Ethan gently laid her down. "She's so cold," Lily whispered, helping her father wrap the blankets around their unexpected guest. The woman's clothes were soaked through with melted snow. "We need to get her warm, slow, and steady," Ethan said, falling back on first aid training from his years working search and rescue. "Get some broth heating on the stove, and bring my emergency kit from the mudroom." While Lily hurried to the kitchen, Ethan checked the woman's vital signs. Her pulse was there, but weak and irregular. Her breathing was shallow, little more than a whisper. Frostbite had already started to mottle her fingers and the tip of her nose. "Here's the kit," Lily said, setting the red canvas bag beside him. She knelt next to her father, her young face pinched with worry. "Is she going to be okay?" Ethan didn't answer immediately, focusing instead on wrapping the woman's damaged hands in clean gauze. The truth was, he wasn't sure anyone could survive being buried in snow for who knew how long, but he couldn't say that to Lily. "We'll do everything we can," he said finally, adjusting the blankets to trap more warmth. "Check that broth. We need to get something warm in her if she wakes up." Hours crept by. The blizzard raged outside while father and daughter kept their vigil. They managed to get a few spoonfuls of broth between the woman's lips, but she remained unconscious. As darkness fell, Ethan added more logs to the fire, trying not to think about how still their guest remained. "Maybe we should try to get her to the hospital," Lily suggested, curled up in their old armchair with her algebra book forgotten in her lap. Ethan shook his head, looking out at the wall of white beyond their windows. "Roads are impassable now. We're on our own until morning at least." He checked the woman's pulse again. Still there, still fighting. Get some sleep, sweetheart. I'll watch her. Wake me if anything changes, Lily asked, reluctant to leave. Promise, Ethan said, managing a reassuring smile for his daughter's benefit. Once Lily had gone upstairs, he settled into the chair she'd vacated, his eyes fixed on the woman's face. She was young, probably in her 30s, with delicate features and dark hair streaked with silver at the temples. What had brought her out here, miles from anywhere, in the middle of a blizzard? The night deepened. Ethan dozed fitfully, jerking awake at every change in the fire's rhythm. The woman's color had improved slightly, but she remained deeply unconscious. As he watched the flames dance across her face, he couldn't shake the feeling that she wouldn't survive until morning. Just before dawn, a sound pulled him from his troubled sleep, a soft moan from the couch. Ethan leaned forward, hope warring with caution in his chest. The woman's eyelids fluttered, and her cracked lips moved. "Can you hear me?" he asked quietly, not wanting to wake Lily unnecessarily if it was another false alarm. He moved closer, close enough to see the faint trembling of her lips. The woman's eyes remained closed, but her lips parted. In a voice as fragile as frost, she whispered a single word that stopped Ethan's heart. "Ethan." Then she went limp again, sliding back into the darkness that held her. Ethan sat frozen, staring at her still face, his mind racing. How could she possibly know his name? Morning sunlight crept through the cabin's frost-covered windows, painting golden streaks across the wooden floor. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world wrapped in pristine white. In the living room, the stranger lay on their worn couch, her color much improved from the deadly pallor of the night before. Ethan moved quietly around the cabin, starting coffee and checking the wood stove. He'd barely slept, spending most of the night watching over their unexpected guest, making sure she kept breathing. Now, in the clear light of day, he could see she was probably in her early 40s, with shoulder-length brown hair and worry lines etched around her eyes. As he approached to check her temperature, her eyes fluttered open. They were a striking shade of hazel, clear and alert, nothing like the confused gaze from last night. "Ethan Walker," she said softly, but with certainty, no question in her voice. He stepped back, tension climbing up his spine. "How do you know my name?" The woman pushed herself to sitting position, wincing slightly. "I've been trying to find you for weeks." Her voice was hoarse but steady. "I'm Clara Henderson, a paralegal with Browning and Associates in Denver." She paused to accept the glass of water he reluctantly offered. "Thank you. I honestly thought I'd never make it here after my car slid off the road yesterday." "Denver?" Ethan crossed his arms, studying her with growing suspicion. "That's an awful long way to come looking for someone." "It is," Clara agreed, setting down the empty glass. "But this was important. Mr. Walker, I'm here because you've been named in an inheritance claim, a substantial one." Ethan let out a harsh laugh. "Right. And I suppose you need my bank account information to process it?" He'd heard about scams like this before, sophisticated con artists targeting isolated families. "No, nothing like that." Clara's face showed genuine concern at his reaction. "Your mother's family, the Caldwells of Denver. My mother didn't have family," Ethan cut in sharply. "She was alone when she met my father. That's why she moved out here in the first place." Clara's expression softened. "She let you believe that to protect you. But Sarah, your mother, she came from one of Denver's oldest families. She left them behind when they opposed her marriage to your father." The room seemed to tilt slightly. Ethan gripped the back of a chair, his knuckles white. "You don't know anything about my mother." "I know she used to sing you Red River Valley every night before bed," Clara said quietly. "I know she had a small butterfly birthmark behind her left ear. I know she taught you to make her special apple butter every fall, and that she kept her wedding ring on a chain around her neck after your father died." Each detail hit Ethan like a physical blow. These weren't things anyone could learn from public records or social media. These were intimate family memories, the kind his mother had shared only in their quietest moments. "How?" His voice cracked. "How do you know these things?" "Your mother wrote letters," Clara explained. "Dozens of them over the years, to her sister, your Aunt Margaret. They never stopped corresponding, even though the rest of the family had cut ties." Margaret passed away 3 months ago, and her will specifically names you as heir to a significant portion of the Caldwell estate. Ethan sank into the chair, his mind spinning. He became aware of soft footsteps on the stairs. Lily had been listening. His daughter padded into the room, still in her flannel pajamas, her dark eyes wide with wonder. She perched on the arm of his chair, laying a gentle hand on his shoulder. "All these years," Ethan muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "She never said a word about any of this." "She was protecting you," Clara said softly. "The Caldwells. They weren't kind about her choice to marry your father. She wanted you to grow up free from their prejudice, their judgment." The morning light caught the dust motes dancing in the air as silence filled the cabin. Ethan could feel Lily's grip tightening on his shoulder, could sense the weight of this revelation settling over them both. "Dad." Lily's voice was barely above a whisper, thick with emotion. "If this is real, does that mean we aren't alone in the world?" Ethan couldn't answer. He stared out the window at the falling snow, watching as fresh flakes erased all traces of yesterday's tracks, just as this morning had erased everything he thought he knew about his family's history. The snow continued to fall, soft and steady, while inside the cabin, 3 people sat in weighted silence, each lost in thoughts of what this revelation might mean for their future. Steam rose from 3 bowls of thick beef stew on the worn kitchen table. Clara's hands trembled slightly as she lifted her spoon, still weak from her ordeal. The cabin's main room felt warm and cozy now, with the fire crackling and the worst of the storm behind them. "I can't thank you both enough," Clara said, her voice stronger than it had been earlier. "If you hadn't found me when you did." She let the words trail off, managing a small smile instead. Lily reached across the table and squeezed Clara's hand. "We're just glad you're okay. Right, Dad?" Ethan nodded but kept his eyes on his bowl. The day's revelations had left him unsettled, and questions burned in his mind. "I know you must think I'm crazy," Clara continued, setting down her spoon, "driving through a Montana blizzard to find you. But I've been trying to reach you for weeks. Phone calls, letters, nothing got through. We're pretty cut off up here," Lily explained. "The mail gets spotty in winter, and cell service." She shrugged. "I couldn't wait any longer," Clara said. "The deadline for contesting the will is coming up, and there's so much you need to know." She pulled a worn envelope from her jacket pocket and placed it on the table. "This might help explain things." Ethan stared at the envelope, his stew forgotten. "Those are my mother's letters?" Clara nodded. "Some of them. They tell a story she never shared with you, one about sacrifice and love, and terrible choices no parent should have to make." The fire popped loudly in the silence that followed. Ethan's hands clenched under the table. "Your mother," Clara began gently, "came from the Henderson family in Boston. Old money, old prejudices. When she fell in love with your father, a black man who taught music at the local college, her family gave her an ultimatum: end the relationship or be cut off completely." Lily gasped softly. Ethan's jaw tightened. "She chose love," Clara continued. "She married your father and left everything behind. Her family, her inheritance, her whole world. But she never said anything." Ethan's voice was rough with emotion. "All those years of struggling, working 2 jobs, barely making ends meet, she never once mentioned having a wealthy family. She wanted to protect you," Clara said. "The letters show how much she agonized over that decision. She didn't want you growing up feeling rejected or bearing the weight of that prejudice." Ethan pushed back from the table, his chair scraping against the wooden floor. He paced the small kitchen, running a hand through his graying hair. "Protect me? By lying? By letting me think we had no family at all?" "Dad," Lily said softly. But Ethan continued pacing. "Your Uncle Robert," Clara pressed on. "He was different from the rest. Younger than your mother, he never agreed with how she was treated. When he died 6 months ago, he left everything to you, the entire estate. It was his way of trying to right an old wrong." Lily's eyes widened. "Everything? You mean like the family fortune, properties, investments?" Clara nodded. "It's substantial, enough to change your lives completely." Hope flickered across Lily's face, but Ethan caught it and frowned. It's not that simple, is it? Clara's expression darkened. No. The remaining family members, your mother's, other siblings, and their children, they're contesting the will. They're claiming your mother abandoned her birthright, that you have no legitimate claim to the Henderson name or fortune. They're still trying to erase us, Ethan said bitterly. They have expensive lawyers and significant influence, Clara warned. They'll do whatever it takes to keep you from claiming your inheritance. But I believe we can fight them if you're willing. The kitchen fell silent, except for the wind whistling outside. Lily looked between Clara and her father, waiting. Why are you doing this? Ethan finally asked. Why do you care? Clara's face softened. Because I've spent my career watching wealthy families destroy each other over money and pride. But this is different. This is about justice, about honoring your mother's courage and your uncle's attempt to make things right. Ethan walked to the window, staring out at the swirling snow. The driveway had already disappeared under fresh drifts, isolating them further from the world that seemed to be crashing in on their quiet life. Dad? Lily's voice was small but hopeful. Maybe this is why Mom always said everything happens for a reason. He could see their reflections in the window glass, his daughter's eager face, Clara's patient presence at their table, the empty chair where his wife used to sit. The inheritance could mean college for Lily, security they'd never known, a chance to stop wondering if every winter would be their last in this cabin. But it could also mean dragging his mother's painful past into the light, facing a family that had rejected them, risking what little peace they'd managed to find. The snow continued falling, burying their truck, the woodpile, any easy escape from the decision before him. Ethan pressed his forehead against the cold window pane, questioning whether Clara's appearance was a gift from heaven or a storm that would bury them deeper than any Montana blizzard. The morning sun cast long shadows through the frost-covered windows of the cabin. Clara sat wrapped in a thick wool blanket near the fireplace, some color finally returning to her cheeks. Lily moved around the kitchen with careful steps, preparing tea the way her father had taught her, letting the water cool just enough so it wouldn't burn the leaves. Here you go, Lily said, offering Clara a steaming mug decorated with faded painted flowers. Dad says chamomile is good for healing. Thank you, sweetheart. Clara's smile was warm as she accepted the tea. Her hands were steadier now, though still bearing the pink marks of mild frostbite. At the kitchen table, Ethan spread out the water-stained documents Clara had salvaged from her car. His reading glasses perched on his nose as he studied each page with the careful attention he usually reserved for repair manuals. Legal terms jumped out at him. Estate, beneficiary, contestation. These look official, he admitted reluctantly, running his finger along an embossed seal. But I still don't understand. My mother never mentioned any of this. Clara set her tea aside and reached for her briefcase, which had dried overnight near the fire. There's more, she said, pulling out a worn leather Bible. The cover was cracked with age, its pages yellow at the edges. This belonged to your mother's family. Ethan took the Bible with hesitant hands. Opening the front cover, he found elegant handwriting on the first page, property of the Morrison family. Below it, in his mother's familiar script, Sarah Morrison Walker. Morrison, he whispered, testing the sound of his mother's maiden name. She never told me. Lily perched on the arm of her father's chair, peering at the Bible. That's Grandma's handwriting, she said softly. I recognize it from the recipe cards. Clara nodded. Your mother left this with our law firm 30 years ago, along with other documents. She pulled out a yellowed marriage certificate, protected in a clear sleeve. Including this, Ethan stared at the certificate. There were his parents' names, clear as day. Sarah Morrison and James Walker, married in a small church outside of Denver. The date matched what he'd always known, but seeing it here, tied to this other life his mother had hidden, made his chest tight. There's more, Clara said gently, producing a letter in a trembling hand. This was written by your mother just before she passed. Ethan's fingers hesitated over the envelope. Lily squeezed his shoulder, and he drew strength from her presence. Inside, he found 3 pages filled with his mother's handwriting, more uneven than he remembered, written during her final days. My dearest son, he read aloud, his voice rough. If you're reading this, then someone has finally found you. There are truths I should have told you long ago. He had to stop, the words blurring before him. Lily took the letter, continuing where he left off. I left my family not because I was ashamed, but because they were ashamed of love. When I met your father, I learned what real family meant. They gave me a choice, deny my heart or lose everything. I chose love. Clara waited quietly as they absorbed the words. When Ethan looked up, his eyes were red. The inheritance, she explained softly. It's not just about money. Your Uncle Richard, he was different from the rest. He watched what happened to your mother, saw how wrong it was. Before he died, he changed his will to include you. Why now? Ethan's voice was hoarse. After all these years? Richard was the youngest, Clara explained. He didn't have the power to change things then. But he never forgot his sister, or the nephew he wasn't allowed to know. She leaned forward, her expression earnest. This inheritance. It's his way of acknowledging what was done to your mother. It's about restoring her dignity. And yours. Ethan stood abruptly, walking to the window. Outside, the morning sun glinted off the snow, almost too bright to look at. Behind him, he could hear Lily still reading the letter, her voice catching on certain words. The court hearing is next week, Clara said. In Denver. I know it's asking a lot, but we barely have gas money to get to town. Ethan cut in, still facing the window. Let alone Denver. The firm will cover all expenses, Clara assured him. We just need you there to testify, to establish your identity. Ethan turned back to the room, looking at his daughter. Lily sat with the letter in her lap, hope shining in her eyes. He thought of all the times he'd had to tell her no to new clothes, no to school trips, no to the college brochures she tried to hide under her bed. If we do this, he said slowly, meeting Clara's gaze. I need your word that you're telling us everything. No more surprises. Clara stood, steady now on her feet. You have it, she said. Everything I've told you is true. I stake my career and reputation on it. Ethan looked down at the Bible, his mother's name written in that careful hand. He thought of her silence about her past, how she'd never complained, never spoken ill of the family that cast her out. But sometimes, late at night, he'd heard her crying softly in the kitchen when she thought everyone was asleep. All right, he said finally. We'll go to Denver. He glanced at Clara, his expression guarded despite his decision. But I'm doing this for my mother's truth, not their money. And if anything feels wrong, anything at all, we're done. Lily jumped up, hugging him tight. Over her head, Ethan watched Clara carefully gather the documents, handling each one like it was precious. Trust didn't come easily to him, not after years of struggling alone. But for his mother's sake and for Lily's future, he'd take this chance. The old truck rumbled down the snow-covered highway, its tires crunching through patches of ice. Ethan gripped the steering wheel tight, his knuckles white against the worn leather. In the passenger seat, Clara held a map, though they both knew the route to Denver was straightforward enough. Lily sat in the back, her breath fogging up the window as she traced patterns on the glass. The morning had started with quiet preparations, loading up thermoses of coffee, packing sandwiches, and throwing duffel bags into the truck bed. Now, 3 hours into their journey, the silence felt heavy, broken only by the steady hum of the engine and occasional static from the old radio. Mind if I turn this down? Clara asked, reaching for the radio dial. Her voice seemed to break some invisible barrier. Ethan nodded, stealing a glance at her. The bruises from her fall in the snow had faded to yellow, but exhaustion still lined her face. How are you holding up? Better, she said, adjusting in her seat, though I keep thinking about how different things might have been if I hadn't made it to your property that night. She paused, wrapping her arms around herself. Wouldn't be the first time I failed to follow through on something important. The truck hit a patch of rough road, jostling them. When it smoothed out, Clara continued, her voice softer. I was married once, you know, to a corporate lawyer, the kind of man who filled rooms with his presence. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I spent 5 years making myself smaller and smaller, never standing up when I should have. Even when I knew things weren't right in his cases, I stayed quiet. Lily leaned forward between the seats, I left. Finally. But not before watching him hurt a lot of people through bad deals and worse advice. Clara turned to look out the window. That's why this case means so much to me. It's about making things right. The highway stretched before them, empty except for the occasional semi-truck. Snow started falling again, light flakes that melted on the windshield. Sometimes, Ethan said, surprising himself by speaking, doing the right thing feels impossible. He adjusted the defroster. After Sarah, Lily's mom, passed, I couldn't even write thank you notes to people who brought food. Everything felt too big. Lily reached forward and squeezed his shoulder. Dad did his best, though. He learned to braid my hair watching YouTube videos. Took me 3 months to get it right. Ethan chuckled, the sound rough with emotion. Your mom would have done it in seconds. Tell Clara about Mom's garden, Lily urged. And something in her voice made Ethan glance in the rearview mirror. His daughter's eyes were bright with hope, not sadness. Sarah loved growing things. Ethan began, the memories warming him despite the cold outside. She'd plant these huge sunflowers along the fence every spring. Said they were like nature's welcome signs. He found himself telling Clara about Sarah's determination to create beauty in their remote location, about her hand-drawn garden plans and the way she'd sing to the plants. She sounds wonderful, Clara said softly. She was. Ethan cleared his throat. After she got sick, I couldn't look at the garden for almost a year. Then one day, Lily here just marched out with her mom's old gardening gloves and started pulling weeds. They were too big for me, Lily added. But Dad came out to help, and we've kept it going every summer since. The conversation flowed easier after that. Stories of their lives weaving together like the snow-covered roads they traveled. Clara shared about growing up with dreams of changing the world through law, only to find herself buried in paperwork and compromise. Ethan talked about the challenges of being a single dad, of parent-teacher conferences and first dates, and trying to explain life's harder truths to a growing daughter. As afternoon faded into evening, they pulled into a small town off the highway. The motel wasn't much 30, just a long, low building with peeling paint and flickering vacancy sign, but it was clean and warm inside. 2 rooms, Ethan said at the front desk, reaching for his wallet. One's fine, Clara interrupted, pulling out her own credit card. Save your money. Lily and I can share and you can take the other bed. The room was basic. 2 queen beds with faded floral comforters, a small table, and a TV that probably hadn't been updated since the 90 seconds. But after the long day of driving, it felt like luxury. They ate sandwiches at the small table, planning the next day's drive. Lily insisted on taking a hot shower before bed, leaving Ethan and Clara sitting in comfortable silence. Thank you, Clara said suddenly, for trusting me enough to make this trip. Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not just the professional paralegal but someone who understood what it meant to start over. Thank you for not giving up in that snowstorm. Later, with the lights out and the heat clicking softly in the corner, Ethan lay in his bed, listening to the quiet sounds of the room. He was almost asleep when he heard Lily's whispered voice from the other bed. Do you think this could really change our lives? The Denver courthouse loomed before them, its stone columns stretching toward the winter sky like ancient guardians. Ethan tugged at his borrowed tie, the fabric feeling like a noose around his neck. His worn work boots echoed against the polished marble floor, drawing sideways glances from passing lawyers in crisp suits and shiny leather shoes. You okay, Dad? Lily squeezed his hand. She wore her best church dress, the blue one they'd bought last Easter. Just feeling a bit like a fish out of water, sweetheart. Ethan managed a weak smile. Clara walked beside them, her heels clicking confidently on the marble. Though she'd traded her snow-soaked clothes for a professional gray suit, her gentle demeanor remained. Remember, she said softly, this building might look fancy, but justice doesn't care about appearances. They followed the signs to Courtroom C, where other people were already filing in. Ethan recognized his wealthy relatives immediately. They carried themselves with the same proud bearing his mother had sometimes shown when she thought no one was watching. Their expensive clothes and perfect postures made him feel even more out of place. The courtroom itself was all dark wood and serious faces. As they took their seats, Ethan's hands wouldn't stop shaking. He clasped them together in his lap, trying to still them. All rise, the bailiff called out. Judge Martinez entered, her black robes sweeping behind her as she took her place at the bench. The proceedings began with the opposing lawyer presenting their case. He spoke about family traditions, proper inheritance channels, and the importance of bloodlines. Each word felt like a personal attack on Ethan's legitimacy. When it was his turn to testify, Ethan's legs felt wooden as he walked to the witness stand. He placed his hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth, thinking of his mother's own Bible tucked safely in Clara's briefcase. "Mr. Walker," Clara began gently, "please tell the court about your mother." Ethan cleared his throat. "She was the strongest person I've ever known. Worked 2 jobs most of my life, never complained. Made sure I had warm clothes and food on the table, even when times were tough." His voice grew steadier as he spoke about her. "She taught me dignity isn't about what you own, but how you treat others." "Did she ever speak about her family?" "No, ma'am. Though sometimes I'd catch her looking at old photographs when she thought I was asleep. She'd wipe her eyes quick if I came in." Ethan's throat tightened. "Now I understand why." Clara presented the family Bible, showing the judge the carefully preserved inscription and family tree within. She explained how Ethan's mother had fled her privileged life rather than abandon her love for Ethan's father. "And how has your life been since your mother's passing?" Clara asked. Ethan glanced at Lily. "Been hard. Lost my wife when Lily was young, but we get by. I work construction when weather permits, do odd jobs in winter. Lily helps with the vegetable garden in summer. We make do." The opposing lawyer's cross-examination was harsh, suggesting Ethan was only after money. But Ethan's honest answers seemed to resonate with the judge, who watched him intently. Then something unexpected happened. Lily stood up. "Your Honor?" Her clear voice rang out. "May I say something?" Judge Martinez considered for a moment, then nodded. "Approach the bench, young lady." Lily walked forward, her hands clasped tightly. "My dad taught me that family means showing up every day, even when it's hard. It means love and sacrifice." She straightened her shoulders. "He never told me we were poor, but I knew. I saw him skip meals so I could eat. He worked in the rain with a fever so I could get new school books." The courtroom fell silent. Even the opposing relatives shifted uncomfortably. "That's what real family does," Lily continued. "They choose love over pride, just like my grandmother did." Judge Martinez's expression softened. She smiled at Lily, then looked over the documentation again. "I must say, Mr. Walker's claim appears quite substantial. The evidence of lineage is compelling, and the testimony." A commotion arose from the other side of the courtroom. The opposing lawyer hurried forward, clutching a manila envelope. "Your Honor, I apologize for the interruption, but we've just received crucial evidence." He pulled out several official-looking documents. These records show that Ethan Walker was, in fact, adopted. He has no biological claim to the inheritance. Gasps filled the courtroom. Ethan felt the floor tilt beneath him. "Impossible," Clara whispered, but her face had gone pale. The judge frowned, examining the new documents. "These are serious allegations that require investigation. I have no choice but to delay ruling until these documents can be authenticated." She banged her gavel. "Court is adjourned until further notice." Ethan sat frozen in his chair as the courtroom began to empty. The hope that had been building all morning crumbled to dust in his chest. Lily's hand found his, squeezing tight, but he couldn't bring himself to look at her. He'd let her believe in miracles, only to have them snatched away. The opposing relatives filed past, triumph evident in their slight smirks. The click of their expensive shoes against the floor seemed to mock every step Ethan had taken to get here. The fluorescent lights of the motel parking lot cast harsh shadows across Clara's face as she unlocked their adjoining rooms. No one had spoken during the drive back from the courthouse. The silence felt like a physical weight, pressing down on their shoulders. Ethan's hands trembled as he fumbled with his room key. The memory of those forged documents being presented in court played over and over in his mind, all those faces staring at him, judging him, thinking he was trying to steal something that wasn't his. "Dad?" Lily's voice was small, uncertain. She stood in the doorway between their rooms, her backpack clutched to her chest like a shield. "Get ready for bed, sweetheart," he managed to say, his voice rough. "It's been a long day." Clara stepped forward, her legal briefcase still gripped tightly in her hands. "Ethan, we can fight this. Those documents are clearly fabricated." "Fight?" Ethan whirled around, his voice rising. With what? More hope? More promises? His face flushed with anger and shame. You showed up at my door, got my daughter's hopes up, made me believe. He cut himself off, running a hand through his hair in frustration. I never meant to, Clara started, but Ethan wasn't finished. Do you have any idea what it's like? His voice cracked. Struggling every day, working my hands raw just to keep food on the table and the heat on. And then you come along with all these dreams about some inheritance, about justice. He gestured wildly. Look where that got us. Lily flinched at his outburst, and the sight of her fear cut through his anger like a knife. Clara's professional facade crumbled. She sank into one of the cheap motel chairs, her shoulders shaking. You're right, she whispered. I failed. Again. Tears streamed down her face. Just like I failed in my marriage. Just like I failed every time I saw injustice and didn't fight hard enough. The raw pain in her voice made Ethan pause. I thought. Clara wiped at her eyes with trembling hands. I thought if I could just help one person, just one family find justice, maybe it would make up for all the times I couldn't. But instead, I've made everything worse. Lily moved closer to Clara, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. The gesture was so like her mother, always reaching out to comfort others, even in her own pain. I need some air, Ethan muttered. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. Dad, wait, Lily called after him, but he was already gone, letting the door slam behind him. In his room, Ethan paced like a caged animal. The walls seemed to close in around him, decorated with generic artwork that somehow made him feel even more lost and alone. He could hear muffled voices through the wall, Lily comforting Clara, and shame washed over him again. What kind of father was he, letting his daughter handle this mess while he hid away? What kind of example was he setting? A soft knock at the connecting door made him stop pacing. Dad? Lily's voice was gentle but firm. Can I come in? He couldn't say no to her. Never could. Yeah, come on in, sweetheart. Lily entered, her face set in that determined expression she got whenever she was about to say something important. She looked so much like her mother in those moments that it made his heart ache. Remember last winter? She asked, sitting on the edge of his bed. When that big storm hit and the driveway was completely buried? Ethan nodded, unsure where she was going with this. I wanted to give up. The snow was so heavy, and I was so tired. A small smile played at her lips. But you told me something I'll never forget. You said, we don't quit when the snow's too heavy, we dig. The words hit him like a physical blow. He sank down onto the bed beside her. Those people in court today, Lily continued. They're just like that snowstorm. They're trying to bury us, Dad. But we're not quitters, right? Ethan stared at his daughter, wondering when she had gotten so wise. Here he was, falling apart, while she stood strong. Clara's really trying, you know, Lily added softly. She believes in us. Maybe we should believe in her too. Ethan lay back on the bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling. The anger that had been burning in his chest began to fade, replaced by something else: determination. Maybe. Or hope of a different kind. Not the fragile hope of easy solutions, but the sturdy hope that comes from knowing you're not alone in the fight. His mother had faced worse odds, hadn't she? She'd walked away from wealth and privilege because she believed in love. She'd raised him alone, working multiple jobs, never complaining, never giving up. When did you get so smart? He asked Lily. Must be those good genes from Mom. She replied with a small grin. Ethan reached out and squeezed her hand. I'm sorry I lost it back there. It's okay to be scared, Dad, Lily said. But we can't let fear stop us. Mom wouldn't want that. She was right. Sarah wouldn't have wanted him to give up. And his own mother, she'd kept her secrets to protect him. But maybe now it was time to fight for her truth. Ethan sat up, feeling the weight of defeat lifting slightly from his shoulders. He looked at his daughter, this amazing young woman who somehow always knew exactly what he needed to hear. The ceiling didn't have any answers for him. But maybe he didn't need them right now. What he needed was right here: his daughter's unwavering faith, Clara's determination to make things right, and his own stubborn refusal to let his mother's story end in silence. The morning sun filtered through the motel curtains, casting weak shadows across the worn carpet. Clara paced the small room, her hands clasped together, while Ethan sat slumped in a chair by the window. Lily had gone to get breakfast from the vending machine, leaving an uncomfortable silence between them. "Ethan," Clara said suddenly, stopping mid-stride. "Your mother's Bible, did she have one she kept close?" He looked up, his eyes tired from a sleepless night. "Yeah, she did." "How'd you know that?" "In my research, I found mentions of it. She always carried it, even when she left her family." Clara moved closer, her voice growing eager. "Did she keep anything inside it? Letters, maybe?" Ethan rubbed his face, thinking. "There's a box," he said slowly. "After she passed, I packed up her personal things. Couldn't bring myself to go through them. It's still in the cabin's attic." The door clicked open, and Lily entered with arms full of snacks. She caught the shift in atmosphere immediately. "What's going on?" "We need to go home," Clara said, already gathering her coat. "There might be something that could help us." Ethan stood, hesitating. "It's a long shot, Clara. And after yesterday—" "Dad," Lily interrupted, "remember what Mom used to say about hope? That it's like a candle, even when it's down to the last bit of wick, it can still light the way?" The words hit him hard. His late wife's wisdom, coming through their daughter's voice, made his chest tighten. He nodded, unable to speak for a moment. They packed quickly and checked out of the motel. The drive back to Montana was tense but purposeful. Clara sat in the passenger seat, occasionally glancing at Ethan's profile as he drove. The snow had started again, light flurries that danced across the windshield. "Tell me about the Bible," Clara said softly. "What do you remember about it?" Ethan kept his eyes on the road, but his expression softened. Black leather, worn smooth at the corners. She'd read from it every night before bed. "I used to watch her trace the lines with her finger, like she was touching something precious." "She was," Lily piped up from the back seat. "I remember Grandma showing it to me once. The pages were all yellow and crinkly." The journey seemed both endless and too quick. When they finally pulled up to the cabin, the snow was falling harder. They trudged inside, stamping off their boots in the entry. "The attic access is in the hall closet," Ethan said, already moving to get the stepladder. His hand shook slightly as he set it up. The attic was cold and dusty, filled with the forgotten pieces of their lives. Ethan climbed up first, switching on an old camping lantern he kept there. Clara followed, then Lily, all three of them hunched under the low ceiling. "There." Ethan pointed to a corner where cardboard boxes were stacked. They crawled over, disturbing years of settled dust. Each box was labeled in his mother's neat handwriting. "Photos. Kitchen. Documents. This one," he said, pulling out a box marked "Personal." His throat felt tight as he lifted the lid. Inside, wrapped in an old quilted blanket, lay the Bible. Even after all these years, it still carried a hint of his mother's lavender perfume. Ethan lifted it carefully, running his fingers over the soft leather just as his mother had done countless times. "Open it," Clara whispered, her shoulder pressing against his in the cramped space. With trembling fingers, Ethan opened the cover. The pages rustled with age, and something slipped from between them, an envelope, yellowed and sealed. Then another, and another. 5 in total, each addressed simply, "For my son." Lily reached for one, but Ethan caught her hand. "Wait," he said. "Let's go downstairs." They gathered around the kitchen table, the Bible and letters laid out before them. The snow fell silently outside the window as Ethan opened the first envelope. His mother's handwriting flowed across the page, steady and clear. "My dearest Ethan, if you're reading this, then the truth I've kept hidden has finally found its way to light. I want you to know that every silence, every unanswered question about our family, was born from love, not shame. I left my family's wealth and position because they couldn't accept that love knows no color. Your father was the best man I ever knew, and they couldn't see past their own prejudice to recognize that. When they threatened to use their influence to destroy his career, I chose love over luxury. I chose you, my beautiful boy, over their hatred." Ethan's voice cracked. Clara squeezed his arm gently, and Lily moved closer to lean against him as he continued reading. "There will be those who try to deny your birthright, who will claim you're not my flesh and blood. But you are my son, Ethan James Walker, born at St. Mary's Hospital on April 12, 1975, I've included your birth certificate and my marriage license in these letters. They can't deny the truth, though they've tried to bury it. To whoever finds these letters, tell my boy the truth. Tell him how much I loved him. Tell him that sometimes the richest inheritance isn't money. It's the courage to stand up for what's right. Ethan set the letter down, his vision blurring. He pulled Lily close with one arm, while his other hand found Clara's and held tight. Mom didn't abandon her past, he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. She protected me from it. The letters lay spread across the table, each one a piece of the truth his mother had safeguarded. Through the window, the snow continued to fall, but now it seemed less like isolation and more like a blanket of peace, covering the past and present in quiet understanding. The Denver courthouse loomed before them once again, its stone facade no longer intimidating but a symbol of hope renewed. Ethan clutched his mother's Bible close to his chest as they hurried up the steps, their boots clicking against the cold marble. Clara led the way, her professional demeanor back in place despite her rumpled suit from the hasty drive back. The judge agreed to hear us immediately, Clara said, checking her watch. That's a good sign. Lily walked beside her father, her hand resting on his arm. The touch steadied him, reminding him of everything at stake. They pushed through the heavy wooden doors, their footsteps echoing in the marble hallway. The courtroom was already filled with curious onlookers and stern-faced lawyers when they entered. Ethan's relatives sat in the front row, their expensive clothes and disdainful expressions a stark contrast to his worn jacket and work boots. He held his head high as he walked past them. "All rise," the bailiff called as Judge Matthews entered the courtroom, her black robe sweeping behind her. "Miss Henderson," the judge said, settling into her chair. "You claimed to have new evidence that couldn't wait. This had better be substantial." Clara stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. "Your Honor, we have discovered crucial documentation that proves Mr. Walker's lineage beyond any doubt." She approached the bench with the Bible and letters. These were found in Mr. Walker's mother's personal effects. The judge accepted the Bible, handling it with care. The leather was cracked with age, the pages yellowed. She opened it carefully, removing the first letter. The courtroom fell silent as she began to read aloud. "My dearest son," the judge's voice carried clearly through the hushed room. "If you're reading this, then the truth I've kept hidden can finally come to light. I want you to understand why I left my family, why I chose love over wealth, and why I never looked back." Ethan closed his eyes, hearing his mother's voice in the words. Lily's hand tightened on his arm. "I met your father at a time when such love was forbidden by my family." The judge continued reading. "They gave me an ultimatum. Leave him or be disowned. I chose him, Ethan. I chose love. I chose you, even before you were born." The judge paused, adjusting her glasses before continuing. "The family wealth meant nothing compared to the richness of the life I built with your father. But I want you to know your heritage, to understand that you are indeed a Henderson by blood, even though I took your father's name with pride." One of Ethan's relatives shifted uncomfortably in their seat. Another whispered urgently to their lawyer. "These letters are dated," the judge noted, examining the paper carefully. "And the handwriting matches other documented samples we have from Mrs. Walker's legal papers." She looked up at the opposing counsel. "Would you care to explain the adoption documents you presented earlier?" The opposing lawyer stood, tugging at his collar. "Your Honor, we had reason to believe." "You had reason to forge documents," Clara interrupted, producing another paper from her briefcase. "I've had our forensics team analyze the adoption papers. The ink dates only to last month, though the document claims to be 30 years old." A murmur ran through the courtroom. The judge's expression hardened as she examined the forensics report. "Furthermore," Clara continued, "Mrs. Walker's Bible contains family records dating back 3 generations. Ethan's birth is recorded here, in his mother's hand, alongside family births that predate any of us in this room." The judge studied the Bible's family records carefully, comparing them to the letters and other documents. Each page seemed to add weight to her already stern expression. "Mr. Walker," she said finally, looking directly at Ethan, "would you please approach the bench?" Ethan stood, his boots heavy on the polished floor. He could feel every eye in the courtroom following him. "Throughout these proceedings," the judge said, "you've conducted yourself with remarkable restraint and dignity. These letters show that your mother possessed the same qualities. She picked up the Bible. "This is your family legacy, Mr. Walker. Not just the inheritance in question, but the strength of character that chose love over money, truth over convenience." The judge turned to address the courtroom. "I've seen enough. The adoption documents presented by the defendants are clearly fraudulent, and I am referring this matter to the district attorney for investigation." She fixed Ethan's relatives with a stern glare. "The attempt to disinherit Mr. Walker through forgery is not only illegal but morally reprehensible." She lifted her gavel. "It is the finding of this court that Ethan Walker is the rightful heir to the Henderson estate, as specified in the original will. The previous ruling is reinstated with immediate effect." The gavel came down with a sharp crack. Lily's squeal of delight broke the formal atmosphere. She grabbed her father's hand, squeezing it tight. "We did it, Dad," she whispered, her eyes shining with tears. Ethan stood there, stunned, as Clara gathered their papers with trembling hands. The opposing lawyers were already hurrying their clients out of the courtroom, avoiding eye contact. But Ethan barely noticed them. He was looking at his mother's Bible, now returned to his hands, feeling the weight of her love and sacrifice in its worn pages. The judge was still speaking, outlining the technical details of the inheritance, but the words washed over him like background noise. All he could think about was his mother's courage, her quiet strength, and how she'd protected him while preserving the truth for just this moment. Clara touched his arm gently. "Ethan, they need you to sign some papers." He nodded, following her to the clerk's desk. As he signed his name on the documents, he felt a profound sense of peace. Not because of the inheritance, but because he finally understood his mother's silence. She hadn't been hiding from her past. She'd been protecting his future. "We did it, Dad," Lily whispered again, standing close beside him. Soft morning light filtered through the cabin windows, casting a warm glow across the wooden table where Ethan sat, surrounded by papers. His reading glasses perched on his nose as he carefully wrote numbers and ideas in his neat handwriting. Clara leaned close, her shoulder brushing his as she pointed to different sections of the draft. "If we structure the scholarship fund this way," she explained, tapping the page, "we can help more families each year. The interest alone could support 3 full rides to college." Ethan nodded, pausing to look at the name he'd written at the top of the page. The Sarah Walker Memorial Scholarship. His mother's name. He traced the letters with his finger, remembering her quiet strength, her gentle hands, her determined spirit that had given up everything to protect him. "Mom would have loved this," he said softly, "using the money to help other families like ours." Clara placed her hand over his. The touch was warm, familiar now after these weeks of working together. "She would be so proud of you, Ethan. You're turning pain into purpose." From the kitchen came the sounds of Lily humming as she prepared lunch. The aroma of grilled cheese sandwiches filled the cabin. She'd grown more confident since the court victory, standing taller, smiling more easily. Just yesterday, she'd spread college brochures across this same table, her eyes shining with possibility. "You know," Ethan said, turning to face Clara, "when you first showed up in that snowbank, I thought you were bringing trouble to our door." Clara laughed, the sound bright and clear. "I was half frozen and probably looked like trouble, but you brought us so much more." Ethan's voice grew serious. "You brought us truth, healing, a future I never thought possible." Through the kitchen doorway, they could see Lily arranging sandwiches on plates, adding pickle spears just the way Clara had mentioned she liked them. The gesture wasn't lost on either of them, how naturally they'd become a family. "It wasn't just the inheritance," Clara said quietly. "That money, it's just paper. The real wealth was in your mother's letters, in finally knowing her whole story, in understanding that love can survive anything, even decades of silence." Ethan nodded, remembering the words they'd found in the family Bible. His mother's elegant handwriting explaining her choice to leave wealth behind, to protect her son from the prejudice that had tried to tear her own life apart. Each letter had been a piece of her heart, preserved between sacred pages, waiting for the right moment to heal old wounds. "When I think about the families this scholarship will help," he said, "I imagine other mothers like mine, other fathers trying their best alone, kids like Lily, full of dreams but facing closed doors. Now those doors will open," Clara assured him, squeezing his hand. Lily appeared with the plates, setting them down carefully. "Lunch is served." She pulled up a chair, glancing at their joined hands with a knowing smile. "So, are you two finally going to admit what's been obvious to everyone?" Ethan felt his cheeks warm, but he didn't let go of Clara's hand. "And what's that, young lady?" "That you're in love," Lily said matter-of-factly. "That we're a family now. That Clara belongs here with us." Clara's breath caught, and Ethan felt her fingers tremble in his. He turned to look at her, really look at her, the woman who had fought so hard for their justice, who had become such an essential part of their lives. "She's right," he said softly. "I think I've known it since you sat with Lily during that storm, sharing stories and hope when all I could see was darkness." Clara's eyes glistened. "I knew it when you forgave me for bringing chaos into your lives. When you showed me what real strength looks like, not in winning or losing, but in how you love your daughter, how you honor your mother's memory." Lily made a satisfied sound and bit into her sandwich. "Finally. Now can we go outside?" "The snow's falling again, but it's the pretty kind." They gathered their coats and stepped onto the porch. The air was crisp but not bitter, and fat snowflakes danced lazily from a pearl-gray sky. Ethan stood in the middle, Lily on one side, Clara on the other. The same view he'd looked at for years somehow seemed different now. Fuller, richer, alive with promise. Lily tilted her face up, catching snowflakes on her tongue like she used to do as a little girl. Clara wrapped her arms around herself. No longer the stranger who had appeared in a blizzard, but a woman who had found her home. Ethan watched the snow settling on the distant pines, transforming his familiar world into something magical. Where once he'd seen only hardship in the Montana winters, he now saw beauty. Where he'd known isolation, he now felt connection. The inheritance had given them security, yes, but love had given them belonging. The snow fell silently around them, each flake a tiny blessing. Ethan pulled Lily and Clara closer, forming a circle of warmth against the gentle cold. He thought of his mother, of her courage, of the legacy she'd left that was worth so much more than money. He thought of the families they would help, the dreams they would nurture, the love they would share. "Sometimes," Ethan whispered, his words carrying on the crystalline air, "the hardest storms lead us home." They thought the storm was over. They thought the truth was finally theirs to hold. A family restored, a legacy redeemed. But what none of them knew was that buried in those letters lay one final secret, one that could shatter everything they've built or bind them together forever. What happens when the last letter is read? Click here to watch the next chapter. Subscribe so you don't miss the truth that changes everything. And tell us in the comments what you think is hidden in that final letter. Thank you so much for watching this story. It means the world to know you've spent these moments with us. I'd love to hear from you. Share in the comments where you're watching from and what part of this story touched your heart the most. Your reflections inspire not just me, but this entire community. If you believe in stories of faith, resilience, and hope, I invite you to subscribe and follow, because together, we're building something more than entertainment. We're building connection. And as you go about your day, remember this: you are seen, you are valued, and your story matters too. Until next time, stay warm, stay hopeful, and keep believing in the light beyond the storm.